जय राधा माधवा जय कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधवा जय कुंज बिहारी। गोपी जना वल्लभा जय गिरिवरधारी जय गिरिवरधारी। गोपी जना वल्लभा जय गिरिवरधारी जय गिरिवरधारी। जय यशोदा नंदना जय व्रज जनरंजना। जय यशोदा नंदना जय व्रज जनरंजना। जय यमुना गिरवनचारी जय कुंज बिहारी। जय यमुना तिरवनचारी जय कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधवा जय कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधवा जय कुंज बिहारी। जय श्री श्री राधा माधव की जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महारानी की। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we read from chapter 6, text 1. It's the first verse or the start of chapter 6, which is titled Dhyana Yoga. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashrita Karma Phalam Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sasannyasi Cha Yogi Cha Sasannyasi Cha Yogi Cha Na Niragni Chakriyaha Na Niragni Chakriyaha. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sasannyasi Cha Yogi Cha Naniragni Chakriyaha. Prabhu. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sasannyasi Cha Yogi Cha Naniragni Chakriyaha. Mataji. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sasannyasi Cha Yogi Cha Naniragni Chakriyaha. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sasannyasi Cha Yogi Cha. Please repeat the synonyms. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. The Lord said, Anashritaha, without taking shelter. Karma Phalam, of the result of work. Karyam, obligatory. Karma, work. Karoti, performs. Yaha, one who. Saha, he. Sannyasi, in the renounced order. Cha, also. Yogi, mystic. Cha, also. Na, not. Nihi, without. Agnihi, fire. Na, no. Cha, also. Akriyaha, without duty. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Please repeat the translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Purport. In this chapter, the Lord explains that the process of the Eightfold Yoga system is a means to control the mind and the senses. However, this is very difficult for people in general to perform, especially in the age of Kali. Although the Eightfold Yoga system is recommended in this chapter, the Lord emphasizes that the process of Karma Yoga or acting in Krishna consciousness is better. Everyone acts in this world to maintain his family and their paraphernalia, but no one is working without some self-interest, some personal gratification, be it concentrated or extended. The criterion of perfection is to act in Krishna consciousness and not with a view to enjoying the fruits of work. To act in Krishna consciousness is the duty of every living entity because all are constitutionally parts and parcels of the Supreme. The parts of the body work for the satisfaction of the whole body. The limbs of the body do not act for self-satisfaction, but for the satisfaction of the complete whole. Similarly, the living entity who acts for satisfaction of the Supreme Whole and not for personal satisfaction is the perfect sannyasi and perfect yogi. The sannyasis sometimes artificially think that they have become liberated from all material duties, and therefore they cease to perform Agnihotra Yagyas, fire sacrifices. But actually, they are self-interested because their goal is to become one with the impersonal Brahman. Such a desire is greater than any material desire, but it is not without self-interest. Similarly, the mystic yogi who practices the yoga system with half-open eyes, ceasing all material activities, desires some satisfaction for his personal self. But a person acting in Krishna consciousness works for the satisfaction of the whole, without self-interest. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for self-satisfaction. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for self-satisfaction. His criterion of success is the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus he is the perfect sannyasi or perfect yogi. Lord Chaitanya, the highest perfectional symbol of renunciation, prays in this way. Nadanam najanam nasundarim kavitam va jagadisha kamayi mama janmani janmanishware bhavatat bhakti ahaituki tvai. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth nor to enjoy beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. What I want only is the causeless mercy of your devotional service in my life, birth after birth. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gokanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna, Prabhu's Matajis. Welcome to this evening's hearing from Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And this is the start of the 6th chapter, which is titled Dhyana Yoga. And this is the chapter where Krishna will explain to Arjuna how one can control the mind. This is the question that perplexes materialists, spiritualists, or anyone who falls in between. I don't know who they are, but everyone in that matter, we are all striving to control the mind. We are engaged in our duties, we perform some spiritual activities, sometimes we go for courses, or we see the psychiatrist, or we do some yoga, right? And everything with a focus to control the mind. And in this one chapter, Krishna is actually giving the idea of how to control the mind. Prabhupada would say that any yogi who is not well versed with Bhagavad Gita, specifically 6th chapter, is really not in a position to be a yogi. Because 6th chapter is the root of yoga, of how one can control the mind. But it is very interesting that the first verse of a chapter that will tell us how to control the mind, Krishna is speaking about anashrita karma phalam karya karma karoti yaha. He's speaking about who is a true sannyasi. So from here, Krishna is actually answering the question that Arjuna had asked in the 5th chapter. Arjuna was asking Krishna, you asked me to renounce work, and then again you recommend me to work with devotion. So he's apparently confusing Arjuna. So he's asking Krishna, now you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial. And Krishna immediately in 6th chapter, he tells him that better you work, better you don't renounce. But then he says, again, apparently confusing him, don't renounce, but be a sannyasi. That's what he is saying. And this is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. Besides the point where Krishna tells Arjuna, Sarva Dharman Parityajya, you surrender to me, give up everything. That is the limit of what the Gita teaches. And that is the pinnacle of spiritual life. But to arrive there, this is the foundation. Where Krishna is telling Arjuna that you work, but do not be attached to the fruits of your activities. That is the meaning of sannyasi. He says that it is not a man who changes the color of his cloth. A sannyasi means one who only acts for the satisfaction of Krishna. And Prabhupada says, full stop. Anyone who does not act for the satisfaction of Krishna and has some self-interest cannot truly be a sannyasi. That is what Krishna is telling us here. So Krishna says, one must be engaged. And where is this coming from? Again, 3rd chapter, 5th verse. He says, Nahi kashit shanamapi, jatu tishtati akarmakrit, karyate hi avashah karma, sarva prakriti jaygune. Krishna tells Arjuna that actually the soul is always active. The living entity cannot sit still for a while, whether it being the soul or whether it's the body. And Prabhupada writes in that purport, it is not a question of embodied life, but it is the nature of soul to be always active. That is the key. And this verse, Krishna is telling Arjuna, because you are of this nature of being active, it is better to be engaged rather than to artificially renounce. But then again he says, but be a sannyasi, be a yogi. And that is where Krishna is telling Arjuna, what I am telling you to renounce, Arjuna, it is that propensity to lord it over material nature. It is the propensity to exploit through the senses. It is the propensity to exploit through the mind. He says that one who renounces that propensity becomes a sannyasi, even while being in his own position. Many times, disciples went to Prabhupada and they asked him, Prabhupada, can I take sannyas? Just casually, can I take sannyas? And Prabhupada would understand, it's Western culture, I've just come here. So they feel that maybe taking sannyas is like getting a job maybe at Google or Facebook, right? So they think it is a force. And Prabhupada would tell them that it is not necessary to take sannyas. Sannyas means one who, while living in this material world, is only attached to the satisfaction of Krishna. So he said it doesn't matter whether you live with a wife, whether you're a brahmachari, whether you're vanaprastha, whether you're a sannyas. The litmus test is whether the living entity is trying to do all his activities for the pleasure of Krishna. And this is what our devotional life is all about. Actually, there is nothing more, there is nothing less. If a living entity speaks, thinks, and acts only for the satisfaction of Krishna, then that person is a true yogi. And all the activities that we are doing, Prabhupada writes in the purport again, is simply to purify our hearts. Prabhupada says that why the living entities have to act in this material world is because the heart is still contaminated. If the living entity does not act, he is not able to purify his exploitative mentality. This is the power of engagement. So how to do this? And Krishna will go on to answer. Krishna is giving us the idea that in the 6th chapter, the way to purify the heart, which means to say the mind, is to engage. That's what he's telling us. And he's also telling us, what is this engagement? This engagement is called yoga. When we think of yoga, we think of immediately sitting down and we have to maintain some posture, we have to breathe, we have to half close our eyes. Yes, that is. But that is only one form of yoga. The yoga that Krishna is telling Arjuna is, you please perform the yoga on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, not outside. Now you perform yoga. And he says how? Yoga means, we all know, it is union, connection with the Supreme. So he says, Arjuna, just perform this duty of yours to kill your enemies as a offering to me for my satisfaction. In that way, you will always be engaged in yoga. And this is a clue for all devotees, especially in our context, where none of us are actually full-time devotees. We don't live in the temple. We are all working, we have our families, and Saturdays we come to the center. But how to be a devotee? Prabhupada says that there is no such thing as material life and spiritual life for a devotee. A devotee is a person who is always in yogic trance, always. And the example he gives of the Vrajavasis. The Vrajavasis were always in yogic trance. When you hit the highest platform of yogic perfection, you get the Vrajavasis. Meaning to say, they are always absorbed in Krishna. Mother Yashoda, always a person who is serving Krishna. The gopis, there is not a moment that they can forget Krishna. Isn't this what yoga is all about? For us to focus on one point. And the gopis, Mother Yashoda, the cowherds, they are always focusing on one point. But it's very interesting that in 2nd canto, 7th chapter, 31st verse, the Vrajavasis are described. It is mentioned there in the translation, Lord Krishna saved his foster father, Nanda Maharaj, from the fear of the demigod Varuna, and released the cowherd boys from the caves of the mountain, for they were placed there by the son of Maya. And then the key is the next part of the translation. Also, to the inhabitants of Vrindavan, who were busy working during daytime and sleeping soundly at night because of their hard labor in the day, Lord Krishna awarded promotion to the highest planet in the spiritual sky. Just imagine, what a nice example of the Vrajavasis. What did they do? They were working so hard that at night they were tired and they fell asleep. And Prabhupada goes on to say in the purport, here it is clearly mentioned that the inhabitants of Vrindavan were extensively busy in the hard labor of their day's work. And due to the day's hard labor, they were engaged in sound sleep at night. How nice. So practically, Prabhupada is writing, so practically they had very little time to devote to meditation or to the other paraphernalia of spiritual activities. But factually, they were engaged in the highest spiritual activities only. Everything done by them was spiritualized because everything was dovetailed in their relationship with Lord Sri Krishna. The central point of activities was Krishna. As such, the so-called activities in the material world were saturated with spiritual potency. That is the advantage of the way of Bhakti Yoga. How wonderful. There is no better way to describe the advantage of practicing Bhakti Yoga. One should discharge one's duty on Lord Krishna's behalf, and all one's actions will be saturated with Krishna thought, the highest pattern of trance in spiritual realization. How nice Prabhupada writes. It is the highest pattern of trance. You know, there are always certain patterns in each field. And he says that the highest pattern in trance, the field of trance or the field of yoga, is saturated with thought. And what thought? He says he calls it Krishna thought. So one who is saturated in thinking about Krishna, the Vrajavasis, what were they doing? They worked hard and they slept soundly at night. And why did they sleep soundly at night? Because they had nothing in their heart except for Krishna. When we aspire for the fruits of our activities, our mind is caught up. Will I get this? Will I get that? Will this happen? Will that happen? And that agitation itself, it prevents us from having sound sleep at night. But the Vrajavasis always slept very peacefully at night. My Guru Maharaj always used to say that there are two signs that one is a devotee. He used to say a devotee is a person who's always smiling, and a devotee is when he puts his head on the pillow, he knocks out. He used to say that is true sign of devotee. Meaning to say, in his heart, there is nothing. He's not aspiring for anything. He only has Krishna in his heart. And this is exactly what Prabhupada is telling us here. The moment the Vrajavasis fell asleep, they immediately knocked out. Because why? Every action of theirs was saturated with the thought of Krishna. So here, Prabhupada is telling us that the mind is the pivot. When we go to sleep, the only thing that is functioning is the mind. We dream. When we dream, it is the function of the mind. And when we are awake also, for those who are not yogis, 99% of population lives through the mind. We are not able to see what is actually the reality. The mind tells us, this person is my enemy. And we accept, yes sir, this person is my enemy. And the mind says, this person said something nice about you. This person is your friend. And we say, yes sir, my dear mind, this person is my friend. So like that, sankalpa, vikalpa. Whatever the mind tells us, the living entity believes. And the living entity lives through the agency of the mind. And it is mentioned that a person who lives through the agency of the mind never really lives, because he's simply living the life of someone else. Because the mind is not us. But because, like the Vrajavasis, they were always established in reality. They knew that they were not the material, they never had a material mind. Because why? They were always absorbed in Krishna. The best way to control the mind is to saturate our mind with Krishna consciousness. Hearing about Krishna, filling the holes of our ears with Krishna, the vibrations of Krishna. And with our body, we act for Krishna. And with our tongue, we speak about Krishna. In this way, the material mind gets annihilated. And then we are able to truly see what is happening right in front of us. And this is the point where Prabhupada is telling us that to attain this point, one has to be engaged. But Mahaprabhu tells us that while we are engaged, he tells us that there will be many inebriaties, there will be many disturbances. There will be people, there will not be people, there will be good circumstances, there will be bad circumstances. But Mahaprabhu tells us that one who is able to tolerate all of this, remaining humble, giving all respects to others, and tolerating, that person is able to chant the holy names of Krishna. Trinadapi sunichena, tarorapi sahishnuna, amanina manadena, kirtaniya sada harihi. Sometimes when we look at this verse, we may only think that, oh, this is only with relation to someone else, to another living entity. Mahaprabhu is actually telling us that in all our activities, the living entity should remain humble and he should tolerate whatever is coming out. He should tolerate his own aspiration for the fruits. He should tolerate the trouble that comes out of his duty. And then the mind will flow towards the chanting of the holy name. This is a very practical example. Sometimes when we come back home from work, it's very difficult for us to chant because we are very affected by what has happened at work. Even sometimes morning, it is difficult for us to wake up because of hard labor. But Mahaprabhu is telling us the living entity should tolerate. And through that tolerance, the living entity is always able to chant the holy names of Krishna. And tolerate means tolerate this sankalpa and vikalpa of the mind. Because the mind tells us, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. This is what I want, this is what I don't want. Mahaprabhu is telling us that the living entity must rise above what we want and what we don't want. When we rise above that, then we are able to touch the holy names of Krishna consistently. The consistency actually depends on this. And an example of this we can see. We will look at one positive example and we will look at apparently a negative example from Bhagavatam. And the positive example that we want to look at, or who we want to look at, is Bhishma Dev. Bhishma Dev was a Kshatriya. He wasn't a sannyasi. He did not go to the mountains or he did not go to the forest. He was actually in the thick and thin of the war of Kurukshetra and all the politics that was actually happening between the Pandavas and the Kauravas. But we as Vaishnavas accept him as one of the Mahajans who teaches us how to progress in devotional life. Just imagine a Kshatriya becoming a Mahajan. How he is a Mahajan is proven when he is leaving his body. In all his life, you will find it is very difficult to pinpoint in Mahabharata where Bhishma Dev is actually a devotee. Very difficult to pinpoint. He's not wearing dhoti kurta, No tilak is, sometimes tilak is not there, right? He's carrying weapon. How is he Vaishnava? He's so harsh towards his enemies, right? He's shouting at Karna. Can't be devotee. But he is Mahajan for us. How? When a man is going to leave his body, the truth will come out. No matter what show he's trying to put throughout his life, when the soul is sucked out of the body, the reality will come out. But when he is leaving his body, he sings towards Krishna. Iti mati rupa kalpita vitrishna Bhagavati satvata pungave vibhumni Swasukham upagate kvachit vihartum Prakritim upeyushi yadbhava pravaha. So this is the first verse that he sings. First canto, 9th chapter, 32nd verse. He says, let me now invest my thinking, feeling and willing, which was so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties in the all-powerful Lord Sri Krishna. This is the first line of the translation. And Prabhupada writes, because Bhishma Dev was a statesman, duty. the head of the Kuru dynasty, a great general, and a leader of Kshatriyas. So all these duties he had. His mind was strewn over so many subjects, and his thinking, feeling, and willing were engaged in different matters. This is the life of the living entity. Our minds are usually strewn over many subjects, and when we get a chance, we try and engage in devotional service. But here, he is actually asking Krishna that he wants to now invest all powers of thinking, feeling, and willing entirely in the Supreme Being. And Bhishma Dev is teaching us a clue on how to remain a devotee even while being in the material world. What Bhishma Dev is telling us is the devotee must retire every day. Every day. Because on a daily basis, our mind is strewn over many subjects. And he says now that, now let my thinking, feeling, and willing. When we go to work, we think, how do I complete this project? We feel for it. I must do it. And we will, that it has to be done. We use our intelligence. But when we come back home, then this verse comes to our mind. Our mind, which has been strewn over so many subjects, let it now be reposed unto the lotus feet of Krishna. So the devotee does not retire to escape misery. Retirement in the material context is when we want to get away from trouble. We retire. Meaning to say, when Friday comes or when Monday comes, we're looking forward to Saturday or Sunday. Immediately we want to retire. Our mind is stormed. And when Sunday night comes, we all know the feeling, right? Sunday is spoiled because we're thinking of Monday. Why? Because we want to escape misery. So Krishna is telling Arjuna that this type of retirement is the wrong way to retire. The true retirement is to get positively attached to something that is relishable. We want to go to Saturday and Sunday because it is highly relishable. But if it was so relishable, shouldn't it give us nice feeling when we walk into work in the morning? So this shows actually Saturday, Sunday, there is no relish in it. The only relish is actually in the lotus feet of Krishna. When we take a holiday, I'm giving an example. Please don't, take it too seriously. And if you ever go to holiday after this, please don't cancel your plans. But the example is given that when we go on a holiday, right, we pack our bags, we pack our kids, we pack our wife packs husband, everyone packs each other, and we go for an holiday. And we have some apparently nice time, and we come back. But the moment we are at the airport, going back home, what do we tell our spouse? Right? Everyone's smiling. Don't even need to say it. Back to reality, right? Back to Singapore, back to work. If the holiday was so relishable, why do we again come back into misery? So the holiday is something that we are using to only escape misery. But here Krishna is saying there's no point escaping misery. You get yourself attached to happiness. And Prabhupada writes in 8th canto that if one wants to be happy, he should be happy now. He cannot be happy tomorrow. He cannot be happy after 10 minutes. He cannot be happy after someone walks into his life. He cannot be happy after someone leaves his life. No. Prabhupada is saying this is the chapter of Vamandev. Vamandev is telling us this, and Prabhupada is elaborating. He's saying that one must be happy now. And this is the art. Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. The art of yoga. That while living now, we become very happy. This is the key. And we may ask, actually now I'm thinking why my holidays are not making me very happy. Is because we are carrying. Just imagine you go for a holiday. Who would you go for a holiday with? All your loved ones. But actually we are mistaken. We carry our enemy in the back. And when we come back with him. Same enemy. We don't dissolve him. And who is that? The mind. We put him, he's not seen. We carry him. He troubles us and we bring him back without any change. But just imagine you take a trip to Vrindavan, to Mayapur, to Dwarka, and you search out for sadhus who are there, and you hear them. Then we are dissolving our mind. Then when we come back, the Mondays don't seem very bad because we know what is the reality. So that is the true meaning of retirement, not simply to survive till the weekend. 90% we try and survive. Let me get through this week. Next week will be amazing. And the next week we say, let me get through, let me survive. But if we truly look at it, only animals survive. Humans live. Humans have to live. Humans should not survive. Survival is an animal propensity. If we are only trying to survive, then there is no meaning to a person's life. One must, as a human being, live. And that is why this retirement that Bhishma Dev is telling us on a daily basis, to saturate ourselves in the thought of Krishna, is true life. It is like the example, if we go and act in a drama, some of us may have participated in drama, and if let's say I participated as Duryodhan, and maybe it's Mahabharat, and I acted as Duryodhan, I acted my part. Just imagine I go back home and I continue acting as Duryodhan to my wife, to my kids. Probably they'll chase me out. What I do, I take off my ornaments, right? I leave Duryodhan, right, on stage, and then I go back home. Meaning to say, I have retired the role of Duryodhan. And I go back home into reality. So this is what Krishna is telling, that it's okay. As the Vrajavasis, they were also engaged in hard work. But when we go back, one has to retire. One has to find a corner in his house or her house, and one has to spend time with Krishna. And how to spend time with Krishna, we will come to see. Here, Bhishmadev goes on to sing the next few verses. He says that Vijaya Sakhe Ratir Astu Me Navadya. In the next verse 1933. He says that he describes the beauty of Krishna and he tells him, this form of yours be the object of my attraction and may I not desire fruitive results. So he says that I must become attracted to you, my Lord, now. And let me, at the last stages of life, not aspire for fruitive results. This is what today's verse is all about. Anashrita karma phalam. Not taking shelter of the fruits. How nice. Anashrita. Fruits we get. But Krishna is telling not to take shelter of the fruits. Sometimes we become very confident. Oh, I have so much shillings in my bank. I'm getting this paycheck. We become very confident by looking at those figures. Krishna is telling us, don't take shelter of that fruit. You only take shelter of my lotus feet. There was once disciples went to Prabhupada and they told Prabhupada that, Prabhupada, for the temple to survive, to run, we have to do certain things. They gave some examples, some ideas like investments, do this, do that. And Prabhupada heard them, he said, it's all right. And then he asked his disciples, what is this financial security you're telling me about? Because they told him, we need to be financially secure. And he asked them, what is this financial security that you are telling me about? Our security is at the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. That's what he told them. So this is the point of Anashritaha. There are many living entities around us. There are many objects around us. Sometimes we become very confident because of these things. But here, Krishna and the Acharyas are telling us that for a devotee, his only shelter is not the fruits of his labor. His only shelter is the lotus feet of Krishna. And in the purport, Prabhupada writes that while Krishna was the charioteer of Arjuna, sun rays glittered on the dress of the Lord, and the beautiful hue created by the reflection of such rays was never forgotten by Bhishma Dev. The point here is, Bhishma Dev, while standing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he was actually admiring the beauty of the Lord. And this Admiration he never forgot till the last days of his life. See, at the deathbed, what he is speaking about. All the activities of a devotee has to culminate in this. Smartavyaha satatam Vishnu. Vishmartavyo na jatuchit. All the activities, we carry tables for Jagannath, we perform arati for Jagannath, we preach for Jagannath, we come to the center for Jagannath. But at the end of our life, will we remember Krishna? Will we remember the loving dealings we had with the devotees? Will we remember the help the devotees gave to us? Will we remember our association with them? Will we remember the nectar we heard from the sadhus? This is what a living entity should strive to remember. Because this remembrance that Bhishmadev very much was attached to carried him all the way through all the troubles in his life. His mother abandoned him when he was young. He took a terrible vow. That's why he's called Bhishma. He did not get married. He did not want to eat the food that Duryodhan gave him because he was a devotee. But still he took the trouble to stay there because he wanted to align himself with the plans of the Lord. So much trouble he went through throughout his life. And all the trouble he could only continue because he was always remembering Krishna. This is the living entities or the devotees' oasis. The material fever can only be treated if we plunge our minds in the cooling waters of the remembrance of Krishna. This is how Bhishma continued his entire life. And Prabhupada writes about the greatness of Bhishma Dev. And he writes one point here in 1933. He says that less intelligent mundaners who want to make a show of being transcendently related with the Lord artificially jump at once to the relationship of conjugal love, imitating the damsels of Rajadam. Such a cheap relation with the Lord exhibits only the base mentality of the mundaner. So here again Prabhupada is telling us that one need not artificially give up his duties to move to a higher position of spiritual life. He's saying that first, the base mentality needs to be cleared. What a nice point. Base mentality. And this is the point that the base mentality would always come out when we are agitated. The mentality that is on top, what we are trying to suppress, when our mind is agitated, we will still try. But when it's too much agitated, what is underneath will eventually come out. It's like a river. If you throw something, the sand will start coming out. The water will still be there. But what is at the base will start coming out. So a spiritualist should not only endeavor to handle the symptoms. I want to be a good person. I want to have moral values. That is just a symptom. If a living entity is only concentrated on that, then what happens is when agitation comes, the base mentality will come out. The behavior goes out of the window, the moral values go out of the window. So Bhishma Dev is telling us that the living entity should treat his base mentality. That means clearing the riverbed of all the pollutants. And then truly the river will become clean. Not by treating what is only in the surface. And then he goes on in 1933. He is again glorifying the beauty of Krishna. He tells that Krishna's hair has turned grey due to the dust raised by the hoofs of the horse. He says that your perspiration, your hair is smeared all over your face, and you have perspiration on your face, or you had perspiration on your face. And this beautiful form, oh my Lord, let my mind always remember this form of yours. And there Prabhupada is writing that Bhishma Dev was repenting. That, oh my Lord, I have hurt you during the course of this battle. He was being repentant. And Prabhupada writes in the purport that Bhishma's repentance and the Lord's merciful attitude are both unique in this picture. Bhishma Dev's repentance and the Lord's mercy are unique in this picture. So we come to the point, how to clear this fruitive mentality. We always say, right, don't aspire for the fruits. Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. We all know this verse. Everyone knows this verse. But Bhishma Dev is telling us how to reach that point. Bhishma Dev was always repentant that Krishna, I am forgetting you. I am always aspiring for some fruits. I want to win this battle. I want to win in politics. I want to live. I want to win in this familial life. So many things I want. But now I am repenting. And when the repentance meets the mercy of the Lord, that is how the fruitive mentality becomes destroyed. How wonderful. It is not simply by doing ritualistic chanting. It is not simply by reading a book that the fruitive mentality will go off. Spiritual life is dynamic. And how is it dynamic? It is made dynamic by the mercy of Krishna. Day in, day out, we chant 16 rounds. We wake up for Mangalarti. We are absorbed in Bhagavatam. All this we are doing only for one purpose. My Lord, please be merciful to me. That is all. It is only by the mercy of Krishna will the fruitive mentality eventually become dissolved. And how does this happen? When the living entity repents. Oh my Lord, I have forgotten you. When a living entity thinks that now I know Krishna, I have arrived, I know my spiritual master, I know what he wants, I've completed all my service to my spiritual master. When a living entity feels like that, the doors of Vaikuntha is closed. Because the mercy does not descend. When one is in a lower position, the mercy will descend. So when a living entity feels that, my Lord, I am not remembering you, you please help me, Krishna will annihilate the fruitive mentality. And this is exactly what Bhishma Dev was doing. And this is known as Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. Kaushalam means art. Yoga means we know. The art of yoga is this: living in the material world, but at the same time repenting that we are forgetting Krishna and waiting for Krishna's mercy to descend. And in that way, the fruitive mentality becomes annihilated. And we conclude with one negative example. It's not a negative example, but that's how Bhagavatam works. By using a devotee, Krishna will tell us how to act and how not to act. Using Bhishma Dev, he told us how to act, and using the great Bharat Maharaj, he told us how not to act. So Bharat Maharaj, as we all know, I'll fast forward, he was a great king, the son of Rishabh Dev. So when Rishabh Dev went into the forest, he gave up his kingdom to his most qualified son, Bharat Maharaj. And when Bharat Maharaj also was a great king, and that's why we called Bharat Varsh. He was named after him. He's such a great king. And eventually he also left like his father into the forest. But what happened to Bharat Maharaj was, Bharat Maharaj, when he renounced everything, his wife, his children, the whole world, that was the kingdom, all his opulence, when he went into the forest, he got caught being attached to a petty deer. He left everything. Bhishma Dev did not leave anything. He was there. At the end, he remembered Krishna, he went back. Bharat Maharaj left everything. But when he went to the forest, he forgot Krishna. And eventually he took birth as a deer. And it is mentioned that the devotion of Bharat Maharaj was so high that the hairs of his body stood on end. And all the ecstatic bodily symptoms were manifest. So he was already at the stage of bhav. He was experiencing the transcendental ecstatic symptoms. But then what happened? Prabhupada writes that he had almost reached the point of loving service to the Supreme Lord. But even from that platform, he could fall down onto the material platform. And Prabhupada writes, spiritual salvation and liberation from material bondage must be worked out with great caution. Otherwise, a little discrepancy will cause one to fall down again into material existence. And what was the cause of Bharat Maharaj's fall down? Maharaj Bharat's compassion for the deer was the beginning of his fall down into the material world. This is a warning for all spiritualists from Bhagavatam that not everything is spiritual life. One must be a very advanced transcendentalist to discern what is spiritual and what is material. That is why spiritual life has to be conducted under the guidance of the spiritual master. If it is not, then mundane philanthropy, mundane compassion, mundane sentiment is taken as devotion. If I can speak very nicely, I may think that, oh, now I have arrived in devotion. If I can sing very nicely, I may think that, oh, this is devotion. If I'm dressed very nicely, I may think that this is devotion. If I have nice devotee family, I have a job, right? I may think that, oh, this is devotion. But these things may or may not be devotion. The litmus test to whether one is a devotee is that whether one can remember Krishna and only act to satisfy Krishna. Nothing else is the litmus of devotion or litmus test to devotion. And here it is proven. Maharaj Bharat was compassionate to the deer, which is a good thing. But that was the cause of his fall down from his spiritual life. Being attached to raising the deer, Maharaj Bharat forgot the rules and regulations for the advancement of spiritual life. And he gradually forgot to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings in his bhajan, Vidyara Vilase, that verse, that bhajan he sings, he says that, my dear Lord, I kept reading and reading. My hopes grew. I thought that this was the goal of life, to increase my knowledge, to become a good person. But then he tells that, in the end, my Lord, I never worshipped your lotus feet. And now at my old age, I have realized this pain, and it is piercing my heart. This is exactly what Bharat Maharaj was actually going through. And there, in one of the purports, Prabhupada writes, he says that if we give up our own spiritual activities and simply become concerned with the bodily comforts of our bodily comforts and the comforts of others, we will fall into a dangerous position. One should not give up his interest in attaining the favor of Lord Vishnu at any cost. He says at any cost, one should never give this up. That means to act for the satisfaction of Krishna. Generally, people do not know this or they forget it. Consequently, they sacrifice their original interests, the attainment of Vishnu's favor, and engage in philanthropic activities for bodily comfort. Philanthropic activities are not wrong, but is it dovetailed to the interest of Krishna? And then he writes, unless we increase our faith in the Supreme Lord, we shall be attracted to many other things. This is the cause of our material bondage. So while living in the material world, doing good, doing bad, one must increase his faith in Krishna. And that is why we are all crowded here. I'm here, you are here. We are all collectively trying to increase our faith in Krishna. And as we increase our faith in Krishna and we participate in the activities of the material world, then we can always keep aloof in the spiritual realm. And this one part Prabhupada writes, and I think we can conclude with this. Prabhupada writes, one who is serious, this is in 5th canto, 8th chapter, 13th verse. He writes in the purport, one who is serious in advancing his spiritual life should be very cautious not to become attached to anything but Krishna. Full stop. I'll read that again. One who is serious. So this statement is for one who is serious, not for one who is not serious. One who is serious in advancing his spiritual life should be very cautious not to become attached to anything but Krishna. Sometimes, he says, in order to preach, we have to accept many material activities, but we should remember that everything is for Krishna. If we remember this, there is no chance of our being victimized by material activities. What a nice point. How practical is this for devotees? who are engaged like this. Prabhupada is telling us emphatically the goal of spiritual life is not to be attached to anything but Krishna. Srila Prabhupada was successful in his mission because he followed this to the T. He wasn't attached to his disciples. He wasn't attached to the temples. He wasn't attached to just translating a book. He wasn't attached to just giving lectures. He wasn't only attached to doing deity worship. Through all this, he was only attached to Krishna. And that is why the living entities ran after him. Because there is one man who was so genuine. Because he had such a great spiritual master who always emphasized on this thing. See how when we are attached to a pure sadhu, even our intent, the fruitive intent gets dissolved. And after years of training, when he went to the United States of America, it just blew. Why? Because he was only attached to Krishna. He was not attached to anything else. And what happens if we are not attached to Krishna? If we are attached to anything else while even doing our service? It is given in the chapters of Bharat Maharaj. When Maharaj Bharat was actually worshipping the Lord or was engaged in some ritualistic ceremonies, although his activities were unfinished, he would still at intervals get up and see where the deer was. See? He was actually engaged in worship of Krishna. But when the deer was not there, right, he would get up and see, where is the deer? Now substitute the deer with the phone. Just substitute the deer with our phone. We're chanting, right? Or something goes off. You go up, you'll see, right? And sometimes, even if it doesn't ring, we will go and scroll, right? When we are worshipping. So, Bhagavatam does not tell us that we must all become pure devotees from day one. Bhagavatam is telling us that when we spend time with Krishna, let us give it to him. When we have half an hour, we give it wholly and solely to Krishna. Not to name, not to fame, not to glory, not to anything else. Not to distractions, not to the phone, not to the family. He says that if it's half an hour, we give it to Krishna. And Bharat Maharaj could not do it. And Prabhupada writes, in other words, if one's mind is distracted from worship, a mere show of worship will not be of any benefit. The fact that Bharat Maharaj had to get up at intervals to look for the deer was simply a sign that he had fallen down from the spiritual platform. Prabhupada gives us the definition of a fall down. He said that because he was distracted when he was chanting, Prabhupada is saying that he fell down from the spiritual platform. This is the gravity to which we must take our chanting beats. This is the gravity to which we must come into the center. And when we are singing Kirtan for the Lord, this is the gravity. The moment our mind goes to anything else but the Kirtan of the Lord, that moment Prabhupada is telling us we have fallen down from our position. No matter who we are, if our mind is not strewn on the lotus feet of the Lord, at that point, there is a fall down. And to conclude, Prabhupada writes that he was feigning meditation. The king would actually think of the animal, and this was but a sign of his fall down. And Prabhupada writes, this diversion of attachment, of attention, was killing his progress in spiritual achievement. And then one of the last verses he says, why this happened to Bharat Maharaj? Because you may ask, what is that got to do with today's verse? Shukadev Goswami concludes the chapter by saying that due to the fruitive results of his past deeds, Bharat Maharaj fell down from mystic yoga, austerity, and worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If it were not due to his past fruitive activity, how could he have been attracted to the deer after giving up the association of his own son and family, considering them stumbling blocks on the path of spiritual life? How could he show much uncontrollable affection for a deer? This was definitely due to his past karma. anashrita karma phalam. It is to save us from this great risk of fall down. Krishna, 90% of Bhagavad Gita, he's telling us that one should not be attached to the fruits of his activities. And how does that happen? By the positive example of Bhishma Dev. He engaged, but he was always repentant. Atapyamana hridaye avasitam namami. The Lord appears in the heart of one who is repentant. The moment we are repentant, Krishna appears in the heart. This is from the prayers of the Jantu, the unborn child. And he says that, my dear Lord, you appear in the heart of one who is repentant. Why? Because to Bhishma Dev, the Lord gave his mercy. My son is being repentant. He cannot give up his bad habits, but he is trying to only serve me for my pleasure through all his difficulties. And because of that, I'm bestowing my mercy onto him. And in that way, his fruitive intent got annihilated. And at his deathbed, those series of 10, 11 verses that he sings, from 1 canto, 9 chapter, 32nd verse, if we have time, we can go and read those verses. You will truly see the mark of a devotee who lived the life, but towards the end, Krishna gave him the mercy to remember him, and after he left, he went back home, back to Godhead. So thank you very much, Prabhu's Matajis, for very patiently hearing. I think it's 6:43. Prabhu, should we conclude now, or do we have time for one question? Or okay, we have time for one question. Anyone has any question? So if there are no questions, I think we can conclude, Prabhu. So do we chant one round now? Okay, we'll chant one round. जय श्रील प्रभुपाद की, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की, जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा महारानी की, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। Do you need the mic stand, Prabhu? The mic? Do you need the mic?
Hare Krishna, we'll chant on the beats. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shivas Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे, हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे हरे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद, श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय।
खाली ड्यूटीज पे फोकस कर दो, नेसेसिटी बोलना।
Bhaje Ganta Bhaje Bhaje Karata Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Namaste Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra, Jaya 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 Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra, Jaya Jaya Panchatata, 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 Jaya Panchatata. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Gurudev, 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 Gurudev. Krishna Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Prabhu, attached to your
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादराददायिने हिरण्याकाशिपोर्वक्षः शीलातकालकालाय हेतो नरसिंह परतो नरसिंह यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंह बहे नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह नरसिंह मदेव शरणं प्रपद्ये तव करकमलवरे नका अद्भुत सेवा दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभृङ्गा केशवते सानरनिरूपा जगदीश हरे जगदीश हरे जगदीश हरे
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please. Hare Krishna. So thank you all devotees for coming today. and Bhagavad Gita. So we'll continue Bhagavatam tomorrow, and we're just 2 weeks away from the glorious Gaur Purnima festival. And as has been announced already, there will be 3 programs: Saturday evening, Sunday morning, and Sunday evening. The devotees can book one of these slots to the puja panel. So let's all prepare nicely the prayers to God. There are so many auspicious of great Acharya.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
And listen to great Acharya. So many opportunities for us to pray. Complete the lotus feet and they are merciful to us and bestow upon us rich crystals. We firmly absorb weeks and realize the chanting and remembrance and solution of our purpose. Hare Krishna.
Going off? All right.